what I'm going to do is I'm going to take about 15 to 20 minutes to kind of share with you what we are doing with this ministry, what it is, what we value, what our challenges are, and then I want to ask Titus to come and give you a chance to ask any questions you may have about this particular ministry. No fancy slideshow or videos. Okay, we're going to be honest and transparent. We want to tell you a little bit about our story and some of the things that define us as an organization and what we're trying to accomplish. So my guess is if I began this, well, let me do it. How many of you know someone that is battling addiction? Just slip your hand up. Okay. I probably should ask the opposite question. How many of you know no one that's battling addiction? Because very few hands would go up. The reality of Appalachia, especially our state, is we are in the midst of, as every politician will tell you in election season, we are in the midst of what is an epidemic of lives that are being absolutely destroyed by what we would call addiction. 3 years ago, a little over 3 years ago, me and one of my best friends were standing in his side yard. He had just moved back. Shortly before that, he had moved back from Charleston, South Carolina, to come to Randolph Street. It's the only reason they moved back is they wanted to be a part of the work of the gospel in Appalachia. And our families were off to the side, and they were grilling, and kids were playing, and this guy and myself, we stood off to a side yard, and we were weeping over an individual that we deeply loved who was destroying his life with drugs. And in the midst of that time, we sat there that evening. I'll never forget this as long as I live. We sat there that evening, and we wept together, and we prayed together. And we had no idea how to best help this young man. We sent him away to North Carolina at the time. And that evening, we talked about whatever the Lord does and however the Lord does it, we want to be a part of helping guys and gals in West Virginia, in Appalachia, battle this epidemic from a Christ-centered perspective, whatever that means. And so that evening, as we stood there with tears running down our faces and dreaming about what the Lord might do, having no clue what it might end up being, we knew one thing, and I'll come back to this in just a moment. We knew that Christ was the answer to this issue. And so as we stood there a few years ago and we prayed and we talked about it, we decided to put feet to our prayers and to begin moving forward to establish an organization called Hope For Appalachia. Hope For Appalachia was born out of a vision that Christ is able to change men and women's hearts and move them toward a life of faithfulness to Him. It's been a few years now since we've done that, and since then, we have established Hope For Appalachia as a 501c3 organization. We've established a board. We did all the things the state and the federal government requires of us. We hired a staff individual, James Titus, who's with us. He'll be up here in just a moment. Him and his wife, Dawn, have so incredibly served our guys and continue to do that. We purchased a few homes, though only one of those homes is active right now. We have served over 35 men over the past couple of years, men from all over our state and from other states. We have 2 staff members. James is our program director. I'm calling him James. That's really weird for me. We call him Titus. That's his last name. So I'm going to just refer to him as Titus for the rest of this time. Our guys, Hope For Appalachia guys, are sitting everything. Who's James? Who's James? James who? So Titus has led our program these last couple of years. Him and his wife, Dawn, live next door to our main recovery home. Out back is another individual. His name is Dana. He's not with us this morning. He's likewise on staff at Hope For Appalachia, and they are serving our guys diligently and faithfully. We also have a team of volunteers that consists of a number of men who faithfully engage with these guys and are involved with our ministry, trying to help these men live in a manner that's honoring to Christ. So That dream in that side yard has turned into a home, a residential recovery home for men that are battling addiction. A Christ-centered residential recovery home for men who are in the midst of the throes of addiction. We also, on top of that, have what we call an outreach program where our staff guys are connected with guys and gals. I don't know that we can even count. It seems like I hear of new ones all the time. Guys and gals who are in the midst of what we would call active addiction. They are there to support them and help them and to pray for them, to encourage them to find help. They're there really trying to help preserve these young men and young women's lives in the midst of these battles. Since that day in that side yard, as I mentioned, we've opened our main recovery home. We've served over 35 different individuals through that time. Currently, we have 6 residents. 5 of those men are with us this morning. I'll say a comment about them in just a moment. It is our intention not only to continue this particular effort, but in the coming years to expand our effort, purchasing a new facility that will house at least 15 guys to provide 24/7 care for them as they move from addiction to a life of faithfulness toward Christ. That's hopefully in our short-term vision as we move more and more toward that particular direction. The need in Appalachia, I don't need to press this on you. I don't need any stats up here to prove it. I don't need to argue the point. The need is absolutely overwhelming. It does not discriminate. It attacks almost every family. And we as the church who have the gospel must respond to this need. And that's the reality. And that's what we talked about in the yard a few years ago. We have the gospel. We are the church. And here's the most pressing need in our region. Why in the world would we not speak into that? The truth of Christ. So here comes the transparency part, okay? Titus is going to start giggling and laughing at me now. This effort is overwhelming. It is a roller coaster. You become attached to these guys. I mean, I look at these guys now. We love them. And what I didn't know coming into this, that Titus did know, is you get close to these guys and you know the battle is real and you lose some of them. Guys, we sat at a meeting though, and I told you I was going to embarrass you. I normally don't like them being at places I do presentations at. I don't want to embarrass them. Well, some of them I do. Some of them. We sat at a meeting the other night with all of our staff guys, volunteer staff. We were talking and just trying to plan and pray for our men. And one of our staff guys, name's Dana. And after a conversation, I looked over at Dana and he had tears in his eyes. And he was referencing a particular situation and he just said, guys, I've buried 7 or 8 guys recently and I don't want to bury another one. That's the reality. I was naive walking into this ministry of how difficult it is and the tragic results that sometimes occur. But yet, we are the church and we have the gospel. Why in the world would we not speak the truth of the gospel into this scenario and into this situation? Let me share with you kind of some values we have as an organization that I'm going to call Titus up in just a moment. As I said, we have a residential recovery home. We have 6 men in that home right now. We have, to give you a kind of an understanding, I should have brought pictures of the home, I guess, if they'd have kept it clean for the pictures maybe. We have 4 bedrooms. We have a 3rd floor that we house 2 men in. We try to give our guys individual living space within this home. We purchased this home and we remodeled it top to bottom. It's located on the west side of Charleston. It's directly connected to our local church, Randolph Street Baptist Church. Our church family has bought into this effort They have invested in this effort, not only financially, but countless individuals have invested in this ministry with their time, building relationships with our residents, devoting themselves to praying for our residents and praying for our staff. We are intimately connected to the local church, but we designed this program to be just that because we wanted God's people to engage with individuals who are struggling and battling through this. We wanted these guys to be around faithful men and women, to see what it looks like to walk with Christ. Here are some things we value. Some of this is repetition. There's 5 of them. 1, we believe Christ not only saves, but Christ transforms. It's a fundamental conviction of Hope for Appalachia. We named this organization with purpose. All right, on T-shirts we put a little statement, there's hope. There's hope because of Christ. We believe Christ not only saves us from our sins, but Christ transforms us as his children more and more into his own image. So as a result of that, we are a distinctly Christian organization. We are a gospel-centered organization. We believe Christ is the ultimate answer for our men. The other night, I went over to the house and talked with our guys, and this is a talk they'll hear quite often in a variety of ways. Our guys have been faithful in so many different ways. And I told them they can be sober, and they can buy homes, have a wife and children, and a good job, pay off all their debts, have everything in this earthly life that the world says you need to have. They can have all of that and waste their lives. That a life lived for Christ is worth it at every level. And so ultimately what we're saying to these men, what we're calling them to is not just sobriety. We're calling them to a life that is faithful and honoring to Christ. We want the gospel to speak into their lives. We want them to know who they were outside of Christ, and we want them to know who they are in Christ. We want their identity to be built not on being an addict, but their identity being built on being a Christian, of being in Christ. So first and foremost, at Hope for Appalachia, we are committed to the gospel. We are committed to the clarity of the gospel. We are committed to speaking that gospel into the lives of these men. Number 2, we are convinced that addiction affects the whole person. All right, so God has designed us to be spiritual, physical, mental, emotional beings. We are complex to the core. Addiction has a way of affecting each of those elements and spheres of our lives. So at Hope for Appalachia, we're trying to speak the gospel into the whole of our lives. And we're trying to call these men to be faithful in these particular areas. Residents we've had in the past have battled significant emotional and mental realities that they need to address, mental health issues that must be addressed. They need, at times, physical attention, medical help. Just the reality of how addiction can affect the whole person is beyond anything I ever stood, and obviously we are there to address the spiritual side of things. Number 3, we are aiming for healthy, God-glorifying patterns in these men's lives. So we're not looking for short-term sobriety, though we desire that. We want to see these men walk into the lives that are healthy, God-glorifying lives. We want to see long-term patterns develop in their lives. Sobriety is not the goal for these guys. We want to see them be faithful men. Number 4, this is something that's becoming more and more important to us, and we're struggling on how to figure out this, to move this forward. We're praying that God uses us for the restoration of families. I don't need to call these guys up here and for them to give their own stories. But they know that their paths and their choices have often destroyed their families. And so we're praying that we can be an instrument used by God that sees restoration between parents and children and sons and moms and dads and brothers and sisters, that God would use us in such a way, not only to help these men move toward sobriety, but to see these men to be faithful men, especially in the context of relationships within their families. I know we've got guys now that want to see healthy relationships with their children, and we want to come along beside them and help them and move them toward those directions. Lastly, and then I'm going to call Titus up here, Hope for Appalachia is an organization that's going to have the long-term view in mind, and we're going to be patient, and we're going to be steadfast in our love toward these men, long-term. This isn't a short-term fight. This is a lifelong battle. I said this recently. As a matter of fact, we have our seniors get together on Thursday evenings that Tim and Becky lead, and I was there, and they asked me to give a little update on Hope for Appalachia. And I said this, and I don't mind saying this in front of these guys. You know, I look at everything I've accomplished in my life, and I haven't accomplished much, but I have walked through some times of my life that have been very difficult, whether it be educationally or professionally, whatever it might have been. But I can say this, after being involved in this ministry for just a few years, I have never done anything as challenging or as difficult as overcoming addiction. What these guys are doing is more difficult than anything I've ever attempted in my entire life. And relapse and struggles are normal and common. And we want to be steadfast in our love toward these men because they are created in the image of God. And we want to be patient and love them and care for them and nurture the work of Christ in them. A couple of things you can do if you want to get involved with Hope for Appalachia. Our website is hopeforapalachia.org. You have to know how to spell Appalachia to get there, okay? hopeforapalachia.org. You can log on. You can read about what we do and what we try to do, and you'll see our board of directors. I think you'll see a staff page on there likewise. Should have it, or it'll be up soon, a little bio of our staff guys. The biggest thing you can do for our organization right now is to pray for us, to pray for our staff, to pray for our residents. You don't need to know names. Just ask God to do a work in the residents at Hope for Appalachia, to continue his grace in their lives, to produce in our staff a persevering commitment to these men, because the ups can be really high and the downs can be overwhelmingly low. Just pray that God would grant steadfast, patient love for our staff. We would value your prayers over everything. There's nothing greater you can do for Hope for Appalachia than to pray for us. We do have giving campaigns that we have out. We have one called 2,000 for 25. And what we're asking is 2,000 Appalachians to come along beside of us and give $25 a month. It's really simple. But to give $25 a month, I mean, it's not even a meal out if it's a nice meal. It's not even a meal out for a husband and wife, but we're asking, hey, just set aside that every month and give it to Hope for Appalachia. You can do that online. You can mail it. But we're asking 2,000 Appalachians to come along beside of us and say, hey, we want to take responsibility for this issue. From a Christ-centered perspective, we want to take responsibility for this issue and see this work continue into the lives of these. Listen, everything we're doing is worth it if one guy turns his life to following Christ and becomes a faithful man. It is absolutely worth it. All right, Titus, come up here. I know you got a bell that's going to ring here in a few minutes, okay? So the pressure of the bell is on us. This is James Titus. I'll say a couple of words about him. Titus battled addiction for how many years? A while. 13 to 15 years. His addiction ended up leading him to a dormitory called federal prison for 5 years. And during that time, the Lord began to work in his heart, and not only began to work in his heart there, but afterwards he went through a recovery program. God gifted him not only to go through the recovery program, but then on the backside of that to start investing in men's lives. He became a program director of another recovery program. He invited me to come and teach there, and that's how our relationship began. And as we began dreaming about Hope for Appalachia and what the Lord was placing in our heart, this guy became our primary target as the guy to lead us in serving men to the best of our abilities. His wife is Dawn. She's located right there, and they have a little girl named Eden. She runs Hope for Appalachia more or less, but she's in the nursery right now. You can talk to her afterwards. But it's always good. I know that was a very, very brief presentation, right? Gave you 10,000-foot view. But the best thing we can do is just stop and just say, hey, do you have questions about what we're doing and why we are doing what we are doing? And we'll try to answer them to the best of our ability. Yes, ma'am.
Is your organization and outreach of your church, is it financially supported by your?
I'm going to answer that with a no and a yes, okay? So it is a separate organization. We established a 501c3 organization that is, as entities are concerned, it is a separate organization. With that said, Randolph Street invests heavily into Hope for Appalachia financially and time, and they give me, I lead the organization, and our elders give me permission to, it was funny, he'll laugh at me for this. I went to him in an elders meeting a couple years ago and I said, hey, just give me one day a week to invest myself in this organization. Well, I think I'm working for Hope for Appalachia 6 days a week and Randolph Street 1 day a week. So it's kind of a no and a yes answer, but they're very heavily involved. Go ahead.
Do you see yourself opening a facility for females, for youth?
From day one, we have said it is our aim to eventually serve ladies that are battling addiction. Our problem is, kind of like my sermon this morning, we dove in the deep end of the pool day one because of the need, and we didn't take time to really ramp up and prepare in every way we should have. So these last 2 years, we have given ourselves just to serve our residents as opposed to really working ahead. But our aim one day, when you start serving ladies battling addiction, and Don and Titus can speak to this much better than I can, the complexities are more significant and the difficulties are present obviously there. But the need, again, this doesn't discriminate. It's men, it's women, it's children. Lord willing, one day we will serve ladies. You jump in anytime you want. You got to speak into that mic, though. Go ahead.
I've worked with the homeless people on the river for over 20-some years, and I want to add to what you just said. One of the bad things about addiction is it breaks families up, and it not only breaks families up, it leads to homelessness. And a lot of those people that were down here are somewhat transferred before we try to find jobs. I'd say probably, I'm not underestimating, I'd say probably 75% of the people at one time or another during that period of time were addictions. And it is devastating. And even in this area here, it's increased.
Just to deal with homelessness, a lot of guys when they come, and this is including myself, guys will come, they don't have licenses, they owe fines, they can't, they don't have IDs, they don't have a social security card. So like you said, a lot of guys that I've met, a lot of times don't have any of that. Not saying they can't go get it or it's not freely offered, but sometimes it's, in light of when you're doing what you're doing, it just seems like that much more stress to even try to climb out of that. So that those are definitely important to us.
Hopelessness is the best word that describes most of these situations. There is such a real sense of hopelessness in them. Yes, ma'am. Someone here had a hand up. A couple of you. Go ahead.
I'll pray for you and your family. It's God's glory that you have
Amen.
to turn your life around and
Yes.
Amen.
Yes, sir.
help with other folks that's all addiction. And the drugs just keep coming in. We got 60 last week. They was in the paper that we've helped take off the list.
And what they took off the streets of Parkersburg the other day, that amount of, if I remember right, it was meth they took off the streets here. I was just recently told about this. The end result of that is what he said in the back. Family after family after family after family, their lives are absolutely devastated by that. And Titus is, to jump on what you just said, he knows this. That's what I love about this guy. He knows it has been by God's grace and for God's glory what the Lord has done in his life.
I don't want to belabor a lot of questions, but you mentioned about ID. Since 9/11, it has been almost impossible to get a homeless person an ID. I've actually took people down there, well, it's been over a year now. They wanted a residence and two things of information, through residency. Person living on the riverbank.
Yeah.
And I said, they don't have a residence. Went back twice, 2 or 3 different places to try, talk to different people to try to get it. Finally, I said, he lives with me, and any question I said, okay, where do you live at? You have to get a residence. And finally got the person an ID. It used to be I could take him down there, meet him from South, we call it Salvation Army, take him down there to get him an ID. And most of you don't know, you have to have an ID before you can even move forward, to try to get health care, try to get some kind of help to the organizations that are here to help. We need to lobby in West Virginia to try to straighten that law out. We had a bill come out 2 years ago. I thought it was going to pass. We had both bipartisan Republican and Democrat support on it, but it was killed in the Senate. And all that bill would do is say that if a church or an organization, a business, somebody like that would vouch for someone that they were homeless, that bill provided that person would be able to get an ID, fix their ID. They have to have that before they can go forward. A lot of these people can't get that ID. As a result of that, they're between a rock and a hard place to live in. So you might take consideration of that with the church, maybe get on board with some of us down there trying to get something, like including us, a little bit easier for these people to get there.
That's helpful.
Yeah, one of my big things when I went to Bible college after I got out of a program, and I went down there and I helped out with the homeless people in Florida, and it's tent cities down here. I mean, I know we have some on the river banks around here, but I mean, my wife would, at the time we were just courting, but she would go out there with us dating, and that was the bigger thing. But for us. And so I know that type of ministry going out to the riverbanks and stuff like that, when you find an individual that's ready to actually change his life, there is options for him. I don't want to act like there's not. There are options, just like with us. When guys come to us, a lot of times they don't have anything, and we're fine with that, and we understand that. But within a month, we can have that. We can give them a letter of residency, which they can take to the Social Security office. They can take to other things. But there's other organizations too that'll do likewise, homeless shelters and stuff like that. So there are options for people to get IDs. So I just want to make sure that is clear. It's not easy if they're living on the riverbank and that's where they choose to stay and they don't want to actually come out of that. Then that is harder, because I've also dealt with guys that didn't want to leave tent cities and stuff like that, and so.
Yes, ma'am.
Do your clients work, or do you try to find them?
Yeah, every guy when they first come, because we didn't really, I guess you didn't kind of really explain. When they first come, guys, our first goal is sobriety. Sobriety, getting them on health care. That's probably, never, I won't say that, okay. I'll get political, I don't want to get political.
Don't get political.
Yeah, don't get political. But, we do have Obamacare, so that is a plus, so they can get help, they can do what they got to do physically. Then we have Health Right in Charleston that also offers free services. So the first 2 months or so are typically saying, okay, you have to be able to pass a drug test before we get you out into the work field. By God's grace, the gentleman he's talking about the help, they sat in his yard. His name is Scott Fox, and he started a business recently. And so we're able to filter them guys through there. There's other places too, other people that run businesses in the church that have hired guys. So far, it has been great because they have been able to work in environments that are with good people. It's not just sending them out to the workplace. We had guys that went out to waiting and stuff like that in food service, and it's not so good in food service industry.
We started as a transitional living program initially, which meant we were going to help the guys who have gone through recovery transition back to a quote-unquote normal lifestyle.
And in that, jobs, driver's license, savings accounts, just everything we would think of. But then the need we began to recognize very quickly, we weren't able to just do a transitional living home because we had a lot of guys coming to us fresh off the streets battling with addiction. And this guy can't say no to anyone. He's got a massive heart to serve and help guys. I'll give one example of our guys here. I'll talk about Jeremy because he doesn't care to be talked about. Jeremy's in the white shirt. Hold your hand up, Jeremy. So Jeremy came to us more or less dead. I mean, he battles diabetes, but his lifestyle had led him to the point of, I think they called 911 2 or 3 different times in his first couple of days at Hope for Appalachia, and God was gracious to him. And now Jeremy has been with us 7 months, has his ups and downs, right? But even in the midst of that, the Lord has been kind to him. Physically, I wish you could have seen this man when he first came to Hope for Appalachia. He was a skeleton of what he is now. But back to your question, we have a lady in our church who owns what's called the printing press. And she's come along beside Hope for Appalachia, and she's hired a number of our residents in the past. She's hired Jeremy recently. He works for them. It's an unbelievable environment, just good and godly people who love him. But, we're saying to him, as we would say to any resident, recovery is important. And there's a period of time, he was talking about it, 30 days, 60 days, whatever it is, where we kind of pull guys back and we don't let them do anything. We provide all their food. We provide all their needs, clothing, whatever, pay all the bills for them. We do everything for them. But once they get through a certain period and our staff thinks we can begin moving them into the workplace, we want to get them back in. Because, and here's the reason why. My wife and I, when we raised our kids, I remember nights of laying in bed just weeping over the decisions they made. But we wanted to be with them in the midst of them making their bad decisions. We didn't want to protect them and then turn them over to the world at age 20 or 21 or 22 to experience all these things. We wanted to be there in the midst of the temptations to help them understand how to be faithful, and when they fail, how to seek forgiveness and how to receive forgiveness. And we want these guys. We want to walk with them through temptations. Listen, they're going to battle temptations toward addiction the rest of their lives. They would be absolutely foolish for any of them to sit over there and think, once I get through 60 days, 90 days, a year, I'm done with it. This is the reality. So part of us getting them back into the world, work and other things, is to walk with them through their temptations and to help them learn how to say no and how to pursue things that enable them to remain clean and honoring to Christ.
One of the other things I want to hit on too is we don't just hand out stuff either. We want them working. To get back to more your question, we want them working because they need to know what it's like to take responsibility. Now, what that means is sometimes we're not saying they have to pay us. We're saying, hey, you have fines, your money is going to that. You have child support, you have kids, your money is going to that. That's being a man. When we say we want them to be men, that's what we mean. So we're having them do things of that nature. I can think of thousands of dollars worth of back child support paid. So those are our goals. It's not just sit around and we're going to help you. No, you have to learn how to be a man, be responsible for yourself, for your actions. Those are all parts of being, it's biblical manhood, so.
Other questions? The bell did not buzz. I was preaching to our seniors the other day. Yeah, I was preaching to our seniors the other day, and I said to them, we went a little long, shocking, right? And I said to them, man, none of you looked at your watches. And one of them said, that's because you don't need a watch, you need a calendar. Point received. All right.
How do you think the legalization of marijuana will affect your organization or other organizations?
I'll give my view on that.
It won't.
Yeah, for us, Guys want it, they get it no matter when, where or when, or any time, any place, doesn't matter. They'll get it. But with that said, I will say this, I think you're the expert on this. Most guys who battle addiction started there.
Yeah.
I would guess very few started other places. They may have. Yeah.
Same thing, same difference, yeah.
Yes, sir.
Florida State, just last week, there was a program on public broadcasting about the drug problem in Appalachia, which had experts from all around the country, different cities, that's really deal with major problems. And the scientific end of some of the programs that Ty Spriggs has been with, which I think is fantastic what you're doing. And when you're surrendered to God, you know, work in your life, that's evidence, I think, of the life of a Christian. You see change in life. And I
Yeah.
know from my own background, say, labor in life, I know I have great appreciation for what God did for me. That's what keeps me motivated.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen.
God bless you.
Thank you.
You have somebody that's battling addiction. I mean, how do they get into your program? I mean, what qualifications that you offer?
Call us. I mean, typically, here's the deal, is we have 6 men right now. We want to house more, and sometimes I push to get more.
Sometimes being every day.
Yeah, okay. But even beyond that, we have other resources beyond Hope for Appalachia. That's one thing we didn't want to do either, was just be about Hope for Appalachia. While we think our situation is unique in what we do with people, we also agree that, hey, there's Recovery Point. I know Parkersburg just got a Recovery Point, right?
Yeah.
While I might not like that cookie cutter mold that they do, guess what? It works. It works, but it also gives people safe environments. So we're not beyond reaching out to other organizations saying, hey, I have a guy. There's other places in Charleston alone that we do, same for with women. That's part of the outreach part. We're not afraid to reach out to these other organizations and say, hey, we don't have a bed, so let's help this guy and figure it out. But it also builds relationships. So if there's a guy that's really wanting to change, I believe everybody at first, and even the second or third time they talk to me. So it's, like you said, it's hard for me to say no. But we at least will get them placed somewhere to where they're at least there, where they're off the street or they're off, mom's not worried or whatever it might be.
And out of that, hopefully continue a relationship with them,
That's-
even if they're in another program.
And then should a bed open up, then hopefully, you know. if
I mean,
they-
we wish we were larger.
Yeah.
We wish we could take as many. But on our website, you'll find phone numbers. Titus, if you want to get his phone number before you leave, feel free to do that. What him and our other staff guy, Dana, does so well is keeping connected with those out there who are in active addiction but not seeking help. Those people need someone they know they can call, talk to, pray with, someone that can encourage them, point them to Christ on a consistent basis. So even if we don't have space, we will work with anyone, trying to help them get in another program, building relationships with them for the long term. We're getting ready to start a Bible study where we can weekly bring them in as just a place of accountability and encouragement to them. So we're willing to work with anyone, and our information should be on the website. You've been overly patient, okay? So thank you for that. And I'll be around, obviously, tonight and Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night. If you have other questions, I'll always be available to talk with you. Titus will be around for a little while this afternoon. Get his email address, get his phone number. He'd be more than glad to talk to you after the fact also. You good with that? All right. Tonight begins at 6 p.m. We would love to see you back out here tonight as we jump into the book of Hebrews together and hopefully be encouraged in our faith. Okay? Blessings. Thank you. Blessings. Thank you.